What's up, guys? Today we're going to be working on getting a string sound that is as close as possible to Ramin Djawadi's strings in the Three Body Problem theme song. Now, these strings are dark, they're moody, they're saturated and processed, and they sound a little bit something like this. So, they sound pretty epic, they sound pretty dark. They're perfect for, this hybrid orchestral science fiction TV series that the Three Body Problem is. Now, one thing I want to highlight is I'm going to play you next just the strings with the sample library I used with no processing, just how they came right out of the box. And I want you to think about what differences do you hear. So let's check out those now. So those are the strings right out of the box, and the string library I'm using is Albion 1. And already we can hear a few differences. The first things that I immediately hear, and you probably too, those strings out of the box are much brighter than the processed, darker strings. Those strings out of the box are much closer to the mic. They're more intimate sounding. You can hear the individual bowing sounds more rather than the space that the strings are in. Now, this is in comparison to the darker strings, which they sound huge. It sounds like you're sitting all the way in the back of the hall watching this epic orchestra play in front of you. And, to me also, the strings unprocessed, they sound less compressed. They sound less aggressive, and they don't sound as saturated. In general, they sound like unprocessed strings right out of a sample library, which is exactly what they are. And I'm just using this comparison here to show you the difference between, just taking things out of your sample libraries and then how we can sculpt the sound after with the processing that we do. The first thing I'll say right off the bat is that you need to be using a symphonic-sized orchestra to get this sound. So you can't use chamber strings, certainly can't use solo strings. It needs to be a large orchestra. The next piece, or I guess I should say, for me, I'm using Albion 1. There's plenty of sample libraries out there, plenty of orchestral-sized orchestras, sample libraries out there. So use whichever one you already have, use which one you like to use the best. I'm just using Albion 1. Another thing we need to talk about is space. So in the mix of the Three Body Problem track by Ramin, there's a lot of space going on. You can hear this lush sound of the room. So we're going to use mic positions to approximate that or to achieve that. And in Albion 1, I'm using this easy mix setting, which you can see it goes from close. So that means the mics are going to be the close mics. And then we can move that all the way to the far. And that means basically just the ambient mics. So the mics that are placed far back in the hall are going to be used. So I'm kind of doing a slight mix of the tree mics actually, and then also the ambient mics. And you can see if we go into settings, here we've got our mics. So we've got close, tree, ambient, and then this last O is called outrigger. But mainly what you're going to be using is the close, the tree, and the ambient. And you can see when I place, this position closest to far, we're going to have a lot of ambient mic. And then the tree mics are kind of in the middle there. So what the ambient microphones are going to do is they're going to capture the majority of that room sound that the samples were recorded in. And that's going to give us that sense of space. So that's what we want here. And then I'll also say that I'm sending all of my strings to their own reverb bus. And here I'm just using Valhalla Vintage Verb It's a concert hall mode. The decay is, moderate at 4 seconds. And I'm mixing it in. So I've sent them all, and then I'm mixing that in at -6 dB. There's no hard or fast rules to follow here. There's no numbers I can give you, but this sounded about right to me to gel all of the different string sounds together. So that's the first thing, definitely, is to focus on space. The next is saturation, specifically saturation of the mid-range, and then also EQing, so rolling off of the highs. And I can show you my plugin chain that I'm using on my string bus. And this is where I'm doing the vast majority of my processing. And so let's start. First, we've got this bus compressor. You can hear when we play it. So we're just reacting a little bit to those peaks there. We got 1 or 2 dBs that we're taking off. And this bus compressor has a lot of character to it. Okay, so I don't know what the original hardware it was modeled after was doing, but this is one of those plugins that tries to model the analog hardware. And so it's going to be adding a little bit of color. This is not like the clean setting in FabFilter Pro C, which is just doing compression and nothing else. This is going to be adding some character, some mojo, whatever you want to call it. To me, this compressor is great on drums. It adds some weight. So I said, okay, I want this string sound to be a little bit darker. I want it to be weightier. So I'm going to use this on the string bus. Next, we have PSP Vintage Warmer 2. This is a classic. This has been around for forever, and it's in the name. Okay, it's called Vintage Warmer, so it's going to warm whatever you're processing through it. And I find that with this plugin, I just use it very lightly. So here I'm just got 2 dBs I'm driving, and then you can see I'm also adding this low shelf here where I'm targeting 400. So kind of like those lows, those mid-low frequency band there. And that's providing some nice saturation there. Again, it's almost not even worth doing an A-B individually because it's so subtle, but once we add all these things together, it really creates that nice warm sound. Next up is Saturn II. So with this one, we can solo because Saturn II has this nice feature where you can individually solo the frequency bands. So let's play the strings. So I'm using Saturn II there just to saturate that mid-range a little bit more. And it creates this like nice dirty effect, which is kind of going to be associated with saturation. And again, I'm using this worn tube mode. Again, you see there's a pattern here. I'm kind of really going for that warm sound. Then lastly, probably the biggest thing in this effect chain is we're using this nonlinear filter from Kilohertz. This is a free plugin, by the way. You can grab a bunch of their free plugins if you go to their website. And you can see that we're rolling off right around 5,000 hertz. We got a little bit of a moderate Q, and we're driving it just a little bit with this saturated mode. Now let's play it without this filter. So you can hear that takes away some of the highs, and then it also adds a little bit more of that saturated sound. So all those things are really doing a lot to create that saturated sound. It's rolling off some of the highs. And yeah, it's getting those strings to sound as close as possible to the mix that Ramin Djawadi has in his 3-body problem theme. Now, the last thing I'll say is, well, how did I know how to do all these things to get to that sound? And the answer is it's just trial and error, right? I can't tell you why reached for this particular plugin other than the fact I've had these and I like to use them before. I would say the biggest thing for me, if you're trying to replicate different sounds that other producers have and you're trying to learn how to get this, is to use referencing tools. So this is metric AB, and this is what I use to get that sound as close as possible. Now, to highlight this, let's just play my unprocessed strings. So the sound that just came right out of the box, there's no mic position change, there's no EQ, there's no saturation. And then we're going to compare that against Ramin Djawadi's actual mix. So my unprocessed strings are A, and Ramin's mix is B. So let's play that now. I mean, listen to that right there. The unprocessed strings are so much brighter. They're so much brighter than the actual mix. And, going in here and doing this A-B comparison, it lit up a light bulb in my head that said, oh, I really need to aggressively cut these high frequencies. This is normally something you kind of typically wouldn't do. In a lot of modern mixes, you're actually going to be saturating the highs and pushing the highs. Because that creates a brighter sound. It creates a louder sound. People perceive brighter sounds as louder. So that's kind of the classic go-to that I would usually go for. But when doing this comparison, it just really made it obvious, wow, I need to be cutting things instead of actually boosting here. And then if we play my mix now and compare it with the actual mix from Ramin. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely a lot closer. And I highly, highly recommend using any kind of reference tool like this because it really, it just makes it totally obvious. Oh my gosh, I need to be doing this in this frequency range or etc. Now, the last thing I'll talk about is because this is a hybrid orchestral sound, it's key to layer other sounds with your string orchestra. And the biggest thing that's contributing to this darker sound is definitely the sub bass. So I talked about this in my other video, but let's listen to the sub bass. So it's adding some rhythm there, some syncopation, and then it's gonna make the overall string sound darker because without it, there's less weight. And so once we add that sub bass in there, it's going to add some weight to those strings. So yeah, and I would say that's about it. I hope that was helpful. Let's listen to the entire rest of the track now, the entire mix. Cool. I think that's all I've got for you guys today. If you thought this was helpful, please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment so I know I'm talking about the right things. And other than that, have a great day. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.